I've done it. Using the blueprints, I've extracted it from the human souls. I believe this is what gives their souls the strength to persist after death. The will to keep living, the resolve to change fate. Let's call this power determination. If you've played Undertale, there's one word that's impossible to escape. It's everywhere. From the save points to the true lab to the final boss, determination is everywhere. You'd be more hard-pressed at times to try and find places in the game that the word isn't used. But what is it in Undertale? If you need a quick refresher, then here's a recap. Determination allows human souls to persist after death. Anyone with the most of it can save and load. Humans naturally possess it, while monsters may only possess small amounts of it. During the true pacifist boss, through it you're able to prevent yourself from dying. And if a monster has fallen down and they are injected with the stuff, they can be brought back from the brink of death. And while we're on the topic of determination, a definition for the word is the following: a firm or fixed intention to achieve a desired end. Be sure to keep that in mind for later. Compared to Undertale, in Deltarune, determination is noticeably absent. Not even the save points make mention of it, instead often being replaced by some variation of the phrase filled with power. Don't be mistaken though, determination is most certainly important in Deltarune. After all, as established in Chapter 2, it's what's required to make a dark fountain. You know, one of the most important elements of the plot. The things that if too many are opened, then only good things like the roaring will happen. But besides just opening dark fountains, I'd like to say that there's more to determination than just that. I'd like to argue that determination is the power to change fate. Your choices don't matter. Deltarune is a game where it's outright stated to you, the player, that your choices do not matter. No matter what you do, the outcome is the same. A factor the game seemingly loves to remind you of. Sure, there are slight differences in how things play out, depending on what you do. For instance, if you choose to spare the enemies in Chapter 1, then King will be overthrown. Instead, if you choose to fight, a different outcome occurs. Instead of all the Darkners coming to overthrow King, they come to stop you. This may feel like a major difference, but the outcome of Chapter 1 stays the same. You get to the Dark Fountain, seal it, and go home. Nothing different. It seems that no matter what you do, no matter how determined you, the player, may be to have an impact on the world, ultimately, nothing you do matters. Right? Well, this is where things get weird. Deltarune Chapter 2 on the surface is just like Chapter 1. The outcome is the same regardless of the choices you make. At least, that's what it seems like at first. If you're not aware, Chapter 2 does have an alternate route. One that the player essentially makes happen by force. It's not natural or normal by any means. You have to actively try and go down this path. When Noelle joins your party, if you choose to freeze enemies using her spells, you'll notice that you can actually kill enemies. Normally when an enemy's HP is depleted, they run away and don't actually die. Noelle prevents this behavior. Her attacks freeze enemies in place, preventing them from escaping their doom. Doing this sets you down something very akin to the No Mercy route in Undertale. Even the music slows down, just like in Undertale. There's a lot to talk about with this route, much of which I won't get into here today. But the gist is, things play out very differently compared to normal once you go through with the weird route. For instance, you don't even fight Queen in this route. Instead, you fight Spamton Neo at the end. But even with all those changes, even with all your determination to change things, your choices still don't matter, as ultimately the chapter ends the same. You seal the Dark Fountain and go back to hometown like nothing happened at all. Nothing changed. Well, that's it then. Your choices don't matter. Even after all that, nothing changed. Chapter ends the same. Well, that was a waste of time. I guess we can just wrap up the video then. Thanks for watching, I guess. Make sure to subscribe. Why is the video not ending? Wait, what are we zooming in on? And why is there a picture of frozen chicken on screen? Oh, right. So as it turns out, your killing spree in Chapter 2, if you went down a weird route, might actually have some impact on the rest of the game. Obviously, there's Noelle. She's completely traumatized after what you made her do. I'd be surprised if this didn't cause at least some differences in future chapters. But one place the player definitely caused a major change is the fate of Berdly. Casting Snowgrave may have actually killed him. The spell is labeled as fatal, after all. If Berdly has truly died, and if he were to have any future role in the story, then the player's actions have derailed that completely. Even then, if we made Berdly die, surely that would at least shake the people around him, right? Possibly causing some changes? I feel it's too major not to have at least some impact on the game. To me though, the most damning piece of evidence that we may have actually had an impact through what we did to Birdly
is the bead toy in the hospital.
If you are not aware, in the hometown hospital, there sits a bead toy. In Chapter 1, interacting with it gives this description. The beads march grimly along their set path. Interesting choice of words in a game that's constantly flaunting your choices not mattering. In a game where no matter what you do, you should have the same outcome, marching along a set path just like those beads. But we're not done yet. In Chapter 2, on a normal route, the text changes to read, "The beads of the toy march on." Nothing major, but after completing a weird route, you instead get this text. One of the blue beads is broken and torn off. A blue bead, huh? I wonder what blue character we may have completely thrown off their destined path. Obviously, this blue bead represents Birdly. I mean, how could it not? It only happens on a weird route where our blue friend happens to be in a comatose state, to put it lightly. But there we have it. A choice that mattered. But let's remember how the player was even able to get to this outcome. The player would have had to go out of their way, gone down such a specific path to even accomplish this, constantly forcing Noelle to proceed, being determined enough to force the game to bend to their will and change something.
So now that we've discussed the weird route, you may be asking, how does this make determination the power to change fate?
Well, we don't have much to go on.
But I feel there is a parallel to the Undertale No Mercy route interpretation of determination.
The player in that route has to be extremely determined to go through with killing every monster. The route outside of 2 boss fights is outright boring. You have to grind and grind and grind to hunt down each and every monster, and when you finally get to the last corridor and face Sans, his fight is designed to make you give up, to make you frustrated enough to quit. He knows he can't beat you, so instead, he wants to make you frustrated enough to stop what you're doing, to make you lose your will to keep going, to wear down your determination, so to speak. But this isn't an analysis of the Undertale No Mercy route. I just wanted to bring up how the player's determination in that route is critical to it, and I'd argue it's the same in Deltarune. You just by yourself can't kill the enemies in the Dark World. You have to have Noelle to do it, needing to persistently tell her to proceed with your orders. And during the Birdly fight, where she refuses to cast Snowgrave initially, you have to wear her down until she finally obliges and casts the spell. That, to me, is similar to how Sans tried to wear down your will to fight and make you give up. But in this case, it's the complete opposite. Unlike the case with Sans where he tries to make your determination waver and make you give up, instead you're trying to wear down Noelle and coax her into fighting. It's a very interesting parallel. Wearing down a determined individual until they lose their will. Different, almost opposite circumstances. Sans is doing it for a good reason. The player is doing it because they want some chicken for dinner? I don't know. Anyways, this all brings us back to that definition for the word determination I mentioned earlier. A firm or fixed intention to achieve a desired end. This definition to me fits both the No Mercy and Weird route, respectively. I'd say in both of those routes, the player definitely has a firm intention to achieve a desired end. And while we're still on the subject of frozen chicken, one more small parallel I'd like to point out is that determination in Undertale was used to bring monsters back from their fallen down state. Meanwhile, in Deltarune, if the player is determined enough to go through with a weird route, the state that Birdly is left in is essentially what's described as a monster having fallen down in Undertale. He is in what seems to be a comatose state, and if our attack was truly fatal, then he may soon be a pile of dust. Now, I'd like to discuss the Determination lab entry from Undertale a little bit. I don't think it's a mistake that Determination's description contains the words, "the resolve to change fate," especially considering Deltarune was thought up before the existence of Undertale. We'll just have to see how the upcoming chapters proceed to really find out. I'd be surprised if we didn't get at least one more weird route in another chapter, or at least something that allows us, the player, to force something that doesn't usually happen to occur. I mean, the very definition of the word is a firm or fixed intention to achieve a desired end. This definition definitely lines up with how it is in Undertale, and I'd also say it lines up in Deltarune with trying to make choices in the weird route. There is one more thing about determination in Deltarune I'd like to discuss. The mention of determination has been danced around heavily. Every save point's flavor text is careful not to make mention of it. This is not by mistake. It's important to Deltarune's plot. We know this for sure because of its first true mention by Queen in Chapter 2. There is one other place in the game the mention of determination has actually been stripped out. In Chapter 1, there's a tutorial battle in which Rousey walks you through the basics of battle. Nothing interesting. The final version of this dialogue goes like this. See that heart, Chris? That's your soul, the culmination of your being. Within it, it holds your will, your compassion, and the fate of the world. There is, however, an unused version of this dialogue that reads very similarly, but notably has one major difference. It reads like this. See that heart, Chris? That's a soul, the culmination of a human's being. Not only does it represent one's will and compassion, but it also has the power to determine fate. What an interesting choice of words. The power to determine fate. With determine in all caps, mind you. The word determine is noticeably stripped out in the final version, and while this is unused, I still thought it to be incredibly interesting, and it is another point in favor of us being able to manipulate fate through our determination and will. I failed to make note of this earlier, but I think it's worth mentioning now. There are definitely some differences in concepts across Undertale and Deltarune, even when it comes to something like determination. For instance, in Deltarune, we see that Lightners, both humans and monsters, possess determination, whereas in Undertale, monsters with too much determination would likely be a pile of goop. Unless you're Undyne, sorta. It is important to remember that Undertale and Deltarune are very much separate games and separate worlds, but they still often parallel each other and share concepts. I think it's foolish to throw out anything Undertale stated about concepts like determination when it comes to Deltarune. Determination's main purpose in Deltarune is narratively different, of course. But I don't think it's correct to throw out anything that was said about it in Undertale. We can't be 100% sure what carries over across both games, but there is definitely at least some overlap. Now that that's out of the way, I think it's very, very interesting how Deltarune's plot is progressing, especially with the weird route thrown into the mix. Determination is certainly important, to what extent we still don't know, but it's obviously not gone anywhere since Undertale. To cap things off, I believe it'll be determination, that is, the player's determination, that will allow us to make meaningful, impactful choices. Choices that can alter fate. If you've made it this far in the video, I hope you see something in these schizophrenic ramblings. And if you do, or enjoy this video in any capacity, I'd encourage you to subscribe, leave a like on this video, and comment down below. It would go a long way in forcing me to make more videos in the future. And with that, video done. Bye-bye.